So hi to the people who have already joined. We'll just give everybody a couple of minutes to jump on and join the call. Maybe even our later panelist as well. Caroline, if you're there, or Annabelle, just had a message that said the email reminder that was sent an hour ago said the Zoom link doesn't work. That was from Fred Ferry. Would you be able to just check that out maybe and resend if needed?
Yes, I will do it.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, we might kick off. So hi to everybody. I'm Sam Batchelor, and this is the Analytics Tableau user group for April 2022. So time zone friendly to APAC and to EMEA as well. Okay, so a couple of things if you haven't been in the analytics tug before, what makes this a bit different? It's all around the analytics in Tableau. So that's anything that you do in Tableau Desktop, in Web Edit, or in Ask Data. So it's all about the analytical functions. We're obviously a virtual group and we're a global group. So we have US time zones, APAC and EMEA as well. There are three of us that co-host the tug, and it's myself. I'm in Brisbane, which is APAC region in Australia. We have Sadal over in the US, and also we have Annabelle over in EMEA. So between the three of us, we kind of take turns to do the hosting. So a couple of things about Sadal, if you haven't met him before. So he is a Tableau featured author, Community Equity Task Force, and also co-leader of this tug. And he, in case you didn't get an idea from the photos, is a bit of a wine connoisseur. So if you ever catch up with him, I don't know if he's going to be going to Tableau Conference this year, but obviously you can talk to him about wine. Myself, so I'm a DataViz lead, Sam Batchelor again, a DataViz lead for Origin Energy in Brisbane, Australia. I work basically with Tableau all day, every day, creating workbooks, doing DataViz strategies, coaching other developers, and sort of managing a server as well. And I have a particular enjoyment of DataViz fun t-shirts and anything Mario Kart, Yoshi, anything like that. So I'm loving these games night. There's challenges as well. Annabelle is our other co-host. So Annabelle's our EMEA co-host. She was recently made a Tableau visionary for 2022. So yay, well done, Annabelle. Really, really proud of you. Yeah, and she's been coming up with some incredible blog posts. So definitely check out her blog. She even goes into the sort of server lineage and stuff like that recently. She's also co-host or lead for Data Plus Women. And we will be doing quite a lot with regards to the Tableau, the conference coming up soon. So yeah, that's the three of us. So generally with our planning, so at the moment we're doing April, which is our APAC and EU friendly time zones. Next month we'll do APAC again. But we'll actually be sort of in the morning Australian time, and that'll be friendly for a US evening. And then for the next two, it'll be more US friendly time zones. So that's pretty much kind of in the middle of the night for APAC, but it'll be great for ES and EU. So a couple of the ground rules for those who haven't attended before. Interact using the chat section, and would love to, if you can jump into the chat, say hi, what's your name, and where are you from at the moment? It's always nice to see the different people and where they're from all over the world. You can also ask questions to the speakers using the QA section. So when they're doing their presentation, please feel free to ask the questions there. Depending on how they want to present, they might answer the questions during the session, or they might actually just answer at the end. But please feel free to put them in the Q&A section of the chat. And the number one rule is just enjoy. This is just all about leveling up and learning something new. There's some, more intermediate or beginner or advanced topics. You never know what you're going to pick up. The session is obviously being recorded, so you can find it on the YouTube Tableau channel, and it's also going to be sent by email afterwards as well. And if you do want to share anything about it, just hashtag or do the @analytics_tug. So today we have 4 great speakers. First up, we're going to have a career fireside chat with Fee and David. And then we're going to bring on Matt Francis to bust some DataViz myths. And then we're going to actually have CJ to take us through a beginner's guide to map layers. So let's have a look at our amazing speakers. So first up, we have Fee and David. So Fee obviously loves data. She works in JLL in the work dynamic area, and she is a Tableau ambassador, Sydney Tug leader. And if you have ever met or seen her speak, you can tell she is exceptionally passionate about Tableau. Fee is based in Sydney, by the way. So David is a Tableau ambassador, a London Tug lead, and works at Expedia Group, and is also the co-executive director for Viz for Social Good. So if you have any questions around Viz for Social Good, you might want to ask that of David at this stage. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing the stage, and we'll just want to thank Fee and David for coming along at the moment. It's great to have 2 leaders in the data community to share your insights and demystify the recruitment process. Do you guys want to give us a wave? Yeah, I'm seeing Annabelle. That's all okay. That's all good. So they're going to demystify the recruitment process and actually tell us how to land a job. So during this, please feel free to add any of your questions via the Q&A chat. But let me just kick this off with a couple of questions that I have. Okay, so the first one is for David. So David, what is one of the biggest myths in the recruitment process that you'd like to highlight?
Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you for joining, and good morning, good evening to Australia. And I saw a ton of people from different places. It's great to have you all here. One of the trends that I've noticed recently, particularly around LinkedIn, and I'm not picking on a social media platform, it just happens to be there, is that it's this idea that hiring managers are trying to kind of be gatekeepers or trying to be sneaky about their hiring, when they're trying to hire. So that's something that I've seen recently.
And any ideas?
That's really interesting. What kind of themes have you seen coming out? What sort of things are they saying about hiring managers being sneaky?
So I think there's a few things where you think about, hiring managers, they're trying to kind of, the role doesn't exist, or the role, they're just trying to kind of gatekeep and not kind of help and hire. But like from my personal perspective, every time I have someone on an interview, I just want them to do well, because their success is going to be my success. We have, when we're trying to hire, we have put in all the budgets in place. We're making sure that the roles are open. When we start that recruitment process, there's a number of people involved in that. So the sooner we get the right person, the sooner we can get to work, and the sooner we can deliver results. So it's in all of our interests to make sure that we bring people. So I'm always rooting for the person that I have on the interview. And I don't think that usually comes across when you see comments around hiring managers.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. Particularly at the moment, even outside of recruitment, it's really easy to mistrust people because there's so many sneaky things that sort of go on in the background, and we perhaps get a little sensitive to what's actually going on, and therefore go, oh, I wonder if they're really trying to get one over on me. So, you know, are they trying to, you know, swindle me on the number, on how much I can make? You know, are they going to try? So I think that's absolutely a good one. I think one of the things that springs to mind for me about it is looking for red flags or green flags, or should we, since we're on a Tableau call, should it be blue and orange? I'm not sure. But for me to try and identify some of those flags, I would be looking for a company that identifies or aligns with my own values. And that means, you know, how do you go about that? You know, how do I find a company that aligns with my values? A lot of that is research. And you might think, oh, they're locked behind these walls. No, there's lots of people that are out there that are willing to talk to you about what it's like. And, you know, some of the things that I've done in the past personally, reaching out to friends I've met through the data community, and I've asked them, you know, what's it like working at your company? You know, and behind closed doors, they're quite open about, you know, well, this is the good stuff and this is the stuff that doesn't really work. And so you can ask questions, you know, how does your team work together? Do you share information, you know, or is it a bit competitive? I mean, some organizations, like some people might like a competitive organization. Me, I really love it when I work for an organization or a company where the people who I work with will inspire me. So I'm looking for a great bunch of people that work at that company, but also people who I know will be the ones that down tools and actually help pull me out of a bind when I get into trouble. So I think one of the biggest tips I have is look for those kind of red flags, green flags, blue flags, orange flags, via actually researching the company beforehand.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Any other thoughts on red flags or green flags or blue flags there, David?
I think there's a couple of things that like we as candidates to roles can do, like a few was mentioning. So one of the things that you can do, of course, is leverage your network. And if you feel like, oh, but I don't really have a network, well, you can find your community. You can find, like all of you found at the Tableau user group today, is how do you expand that, right? There's so many people here that you can connect in the region that you are, but also, and I feel like most people are, I am, and I know a few people that in the community that are happy to do that. People generally are happy to just jump on a call if someone has questions, like, tell me about working at Expedia, tell me about working at JLL or any other company, and what, like, how is that like, or there are open days. For instance, if there's an open day that's happening, maybe you can go and join and learn a bit more about the company and making sure that aligns with your values. So really kind of dig in and try to connect with people and just try and find out more about that. And usually you find out things that you wouldn't find on corporate websites.
Yeah, awesome. And Fee, what about you? Are there any myths that you'd like to dispel?
Yeah, for sure. I think at the moment, you know, there's the sort of talent tidal wave, or the great resignation. There's a lot of chatter about that in the market, and really interesting and fascinating. So, for instance, there's research that suggests if someone in your team resigns or a couple of people resign, it actually triggers you to think, should I resign too? Is there something better on the other side? You know, a lot of the time, jumping ship, it's the grass isn't always greener. So the myth I have is the value of staying versus jumping. And now I'm not saying that you might not be ready for your next role. Absolutely, you may be ready for your next role, but what about you know, reaching out to your leadership team? If you have great leaders in there, you know, you've done some good research, you found the blue flags along the way, good leaders. And if you reach out to them and say, look, I think I'm ready for a bit of a change, I'm getting a bit sick of this, or I think I'm actually due for a bump in salary as well. Any great leader that's worth their value will actually sit down and have a good chat with you about it. Because by staying in an organization and moving to something different, what you can do is you can bring that network and that knowledge of your organization along with you, which can actually help you to accelerate more quickly into new roles. And what that means is you'll be hitting your KPIs faster. You'll be getting a better kind of review throughout the year. So really consider, is there a reason that you need to be leaving that organization, or is it just that you want a change of scenery and you want something different to do?
Yeah, and very interesting. And Fee, can you let us know any of the secret sauce that you might have up your sleeve about how JLL hires great talent?
Sure, there's lots of different ways that we do things. We really pride ourselves on trying to get some great talent in the team, because you know what, when you're surrounded by great people, it makes life a lot easier to get stuff done. And so there's certain ways that you can find yourself at the top of the shortlist if applying for roles, and if we've advertised something. And that's having in your resume your Tableau public profile, so that demonstrates your portfolio and your expertise. Also any Tableau certifications, and for us, Ultrix certifications as well. And these are three things that we know are really translatable into what you'll do in your day-to-day job. You know, you can write a really long resume, and it's actually really tough for us. We keyword search, so great way to get to the top there. Also getting some recommendations from any of our existing team coming through, or highlights. Even if you don't know that there's a job going with us, 9 times out of 10, we've got analysts in 11 countries around the world. We have a lot of work that goes on, and there's typically an opportunity somewhere in the world, and we do a lot of different ways about searching for that. So definitely make sure that you've got that in there. It really, really helps us out, and reach out to people that work for us as well.
Awesome. And what about you, David? What helps talent get to the top of your list, or maybe even off the list as well?
So I'll second some of the things that Fee mentioned, but also I just kind of contextualize things. As Fee mentioned, there's a lot of candidates at the moment, right? So for one vacancy, you may have 200 people applying. Realistically, hiring managers won't be able to read every single thing that it's on a CV. So you have to make sure, like, the keywords are super important, making sure that you kind of find a way of kind of have a step ahead. So the things I look for is at the top, if there's a good kind of summary that tells me in 3, 4, 5 sentences why we should be considering you, and you have the potential, because a lot of the times you may not have 100% of the roles and that's of the skills. That's absolutely fine. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for potential, because we want to work with you and want to kind of develop your skills as well. So absolutely have a really kind of honing in on keywords, but also a Tableau public portfolio is great, because what it does is allows us to sometimes tweak things a little bit when it comes to the interview. I've had situations where we, instead of having someone go and do one type of case study, we'll ask them to just talk us through their portfolio in Tableau Public, maybe pick 2 or 3 visualizations that they are proud of, and then they can walk us through that. And at that point, we are giving the opportunity for someone to be really excited about the project that they have done in Tableau Public and be able to tell us everything about it, from the data side, maybe the collection of the data, why they chose the topic that they were visualizing. And all of those things then allow us to start to unpick all the potential and makes things a lot easier. So yeah, keywords, absolutely one. And then the other one is, and I've done this in the past with people, I'm always happy to talk to anyone. So if I have a role open, I would be happy for someone to kind of go and say, oh, I would love to know more about this. One thing that I would ask, though, is it's kind of a two-way street, in that the candidate or the potential candidate also does a little bit of research. So when we come into this conversation, it's a little bit more informed, and I can tell you everything about Expedia, about the role, and hopefully we'll see if that's a good fit.
Awesome. So I'm hearing lots about keywords, Tableau public profiles, do your research on the company. And I really like that, employers ideally should be looking for potential or possibility and not perfection. I think that's really, really great, as if you're somebody who's looking for a role that you kind of understand, and you don't have to kind of tick all the boxes to apply for a role, especially in these times. So that's really awesome. Okay. Sorry,
I said spot on.
So we've got a couple of questions coming through, but just before we get you to have a look at those, have you just got any parting pieces of wisdom you'd like to share on how to land a great Tableau job?
Yeah, I'll jump in first if that's okay, David.
Yeah, go for it.
So I think one of the things that you should know is if you really want to go and work for a company and you don't get in the first time through the recruitment process, make sure you ask for feedback as to why. And so any great company that's worth actually working for will come and give you feedback about what are the things that you could work on to uplift your skills and capabilities. And what I suggest that you do is you actually figure out a way to demonstrate that. So actually demonstrate that you've made those changes, maybe wait 6 months and then go back to that same leader and have a chat to them and say, hey, do you mind if we catch up for a coffee chat, for half an hour, and demonstrate to them how you've actually applied their feedback and what you've been doing, because leaders love a growth mindset. And so having someone that's actually taken the time to listen to the feedback that they've done, let's face it, we actually spend a lot of time in interviews. If we see people who've taken that feedback on board and used what we've given them, we will really take that on board and perhaps hire them as well, or at least reach out to them when there's another appropriate role for them to apply for.
That's awesome tips. Any thoughts from you, David?
Ask questions, and I've mentioned this a few times on social media. I get really, like my point about I'm always rooting for a candidate. I really get sad when I get to the end of an interview, and I always allocate some time for candidates to ask questions. I go, what would you like to know? Ask me anything about the team, the company. And they're like, oh, I don't have any questions. And it is disheartening. And I've had situations where candidates maybe didn't do as well in the case study, but they did brilliantly when they got to the questions, because it got a conversation going and we were able to uncover some things that weren't apparent in the original, like the initial conversation. So based on the research that you've had and that we were talking about earlier, make sure that you're asking questions. And one point that's important also to make sure is if you are sitting across a hiring manager that gets frustrated because you're asking questions, that's your red flag. You should move on and look at somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thanks very much for that, guys. I think, yeah, there's been some really, really great tips. I really like the ask for feedback as well. With, if for some reason that you're not successful, I think it's almost displaying that curiosity and that willingness to learn and openness for feedback as well. So again, back to your point, David, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to have potential. And I think that curiosity and passion is something great to display during an interview. So if you can have a chance just to look in the chat and see if you just want to pick up a couple of questions, and maybe Fee, have you had a chance to have a look at any questions you want to address?
There's one from CJ.
Oh, lovely.
There's one from CJ. I'll leave that one for you. To start talking about, but there's one here from Katie. So it's a bit of a challenge to provide feedback to those who aren't shortlisted time-wise. Well, like if somebody reached out to me and said, hey, have you got a couple of minutes to help me understand why I wasn't shortlisted for the role? I'll absolutely take the time to explain to them. Even before applying for a role, it's a good idea to reach out to the hiring managers if you happen to know who it would be within the organizations, or trying to find that through your network, because they'll often give you some tips and tricks about what they're really looking for and give you some ideas. And if you haven't made the shortlist, it's likely that you're not hitting the keywords, or they're not seeing that you've got the experience in the area that you're actually looking for from your resume. So, make sure that you're really trying to hit those things that are really important. And that's another way that you can kind of backdoor it as well.
And just when you talk about sort of connecting to your hiring manager, would you do that generally through LinkedIn, or would that be like, how would you go about that, or how would you suggest people go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I would definitely reach out via LinkedIn. The other ways that I look at it are either Twitter, or if I happen to know someone at the company, hey, would you mind doing an email intro? I'm really interested in this role. And so that gives you that kind of insert into it. And if you don't know, then, really go through that job ad in detail and try and think about, what is it that this role is trying to achieve, and what are the things that I need to make sure that I'm hitting? Because if you're writing about your previous experience, but it's got very little to do with the actual role. Recently, I was hiring for an enablement director here in Australia, and I had a lot of people from IT who had no experience with enablement. They're not going to get to the top of my pile if they haven't listed how they've done enablement in the past, because we're really looking for people who are going to elevate others and need that experience to lean on.
Yeah, awesome. Dave, was there any questions that you wanted to answer?
So there's an interesting question from CJ, and the question is, how many interviews are too many if there is a standardized process to find out more about the individual? So absolutely, there's a standardized process. I'm a hiring manager, but it's not a dictatorship, as in I don't make all the calls whether or not a candidate goes through. One important aspect within Expedia is to do with representation. So our inclusion and diversity practices force us to have a balanced panel of interviews. We also have the need to make sure that there is consensus when it comes to an interview. So for instance, Expedia, the way they would do is you'd speak to me, there will be a technical interview, and then you'd speak to potentially someone in the team and maybe a stakeholder or two, depending on the level that you're applying for. And then we would then meet up and make a decision on whether or not we move a candidate to an offer. And I know that sometimes it's too many interviews for a candidate, but also I think about it from about the whole IND side of things. If it's just me, there might be a potential that I'm just hiring and I have a bias that I'm just hiring for a type of person, and I'm not giving other people opportunities. And that may be unconscious, and I'm not doing that on purpose. It just happens because it's my cultural background, everything that goes into it. So making sure that we have different voices at the table, it's really key to be able to have a strong but also diverse team. And that's one of the reasons that sometimes you have more steps within the recruitment process.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think, just on that, I don't think that there is a standard that you can approach with it. It really depends on the role, depends on the candidates. Ideally, as little as possible. So I think that leaders should also be doing research and background checks into people and seeing if they stack up as well prior to. So you can really start to have a conversation during the interview more about fit, rather like how are you going to fit into our organization? Do you fit with the values of what we bring as a team? And therefore, if that we should be able to establish that relatively quickly as well. Mm-hmm. There's another question here that's in the chat, which is from Chris Westlake. I've heard some people say that they almost constantly apply for jobs, not necessarily with a view to move, but to use as office as leverage to climb in their role or company. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this approach to growing a career. Well, you'll burn your opportunities with me pretty quickly if you try that. I might let you apply for a role a few years down the track with me, but if you're burning my time just to say and use it as leverage to get a bump in salary or to get a promotion, not ideal.
Yeah, and also I think that if your mind is in that, like if you think about that way, you may not be focused in the opportunities that are ahead of you because you're always looking to greener pastures. So I feel like going back to Fi's point initially, maybe those opportunities already exist internally. You just need to speak to your leader. You may not get a promotion every year, but there are other things that you can get in terms of growth in your career.
Every year, you're generous at Expedia. Don't be expecting that if you come to JLL. Then I think we've got a follow-up from Katie here, which was on the initial question where the issue isn't really a standardized path into data and analysis like there are things like nursing. So it's hard to see demonstrable proof that someone has the right skill set. There's a wide variety of ability under the title analyst. Yeah, there is, but that's what the job descriptions are about. That's what reaching out to understand more about the role is so you can qualify, is this something I want to spend my time on actually applying for and going through the interviews? But also, I think you know, if we're recruiting for analysts and specialists, if you've got that Tableau public portfolio, it doesn't matter. You know, you can be building out visualizations that have nothing to do with business, but they're more about your passion projects. And we can see from there, from a recruiting perspective, and then obviously from a candidate perspective, you can find out about what we do from our teams and reach out and say, can I talk to someone that works in your teams? I'm interested.
Yeah. There's also a question from Winnie, and the question is, I'm relocating at the end of the year overseas. I'm currently in Sydney. I'm finding challenging to secure a job. Should I be upfront about it, or should I hold back searching for a job now? I'll be honest, when I'm hiring, I'm hiring for now, and I need someone to come in as soon as possible. So I'm unlikely to be hiring for a role that I have the luxury of filling, say, at the end of the year. So my suggestion is to maybe take a look at what things are available there in the market that you want to go to, start working on your CV, maybe get a few friends to review it. And then when the time is right, maybe you are a month to 3 months out of being in your new location, then start to apply.
That's great. So I don't think the other questions are so relevant in terms of the recruitment process. I'm happy to answer some of them on the chat as we go through. But since there's no other questions on career or recruitment, I just want to give a virtual high five to Sam for helping to facilitate our chat, and also to David, who I always thoroughly enjoy chatting to and inspires me so much. So I really appreciate you joining me.
And thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invite.
Yeah, thanks you guys for coming in and helping to level up everybody on finding their next Tableau role. That's awesome. Okay, so let me head back and just share my screen. Okay, so as you guys might know, we've got the Tableau Conference coming up next month in May. I've got all the different time zones up there. So it's both in person if you're traveling to Las Vegas, and it's also virtual. So this is the first, as you might know, the first hybrid conference, because the last two have been virtual. So looking for our time zones for the Apac and the EMEA people, it's basically May 18th, 19th. So book that stuff out in your calendar, book that time. I'm just going to book my days out. Just say I'm in meetings all day. You know, when the agenda comes out, I would highly encourage you to just go through that and just, you know, pick up the sessions you absolutely need to see, and book that all in so that you've got your agenda for your day just, you know, booked. And don't forget to book in some. Unfortunately, they're not doing virtual brain dates, I believe, at this stage. It's just in person, but there will be other catch-ups and check-ins and that kind of thing. So keep an ear out for those, and I'll try and share some of that stuff on LinkedIn as well in the next coming weeks. But mark out your calendars, book out your time so that you can actually take your time to start leveling up. So a couple of the things in the Tableau conference. First of all, number one, DataViz. And we are lucky today to have CJ, who is going to present on maps. And he's actually one of the 3 DataViz finalists. So we've got CJ from the UK, we've got Kimberly Scott from Australia, and Will Sutton from the US. So this is the first time in 3 years. 2019 was the last time that they had DataViz on stage live. So I think being able to, have it back to the live on stage is going to be so exciting. I'm definitely going to be booking out my time and hopefully organizing a watch party for it. So it's going to be very, very cool. Obviously, then have a look at the keynotes, Deb on stage. They will have Tableau Doctor. So this is all stuff that's both in person and also and virtual as well. They will have Slack channels, both if you're at the conference and if you're virtual as well. So just engage, we talk about networking before it, just in that presentation, meet people, find out, start to have a chat with them, that kind of thing. The virtual Viz or the virtual in-person Viz gallery will be there as well. And there'll be a heap of live streams, broadcasts, roving reporters, community chats, data and diversity and data plus women, which Annabelle, who co-hosts this, will be hosting, as well as Heidi, who's pictured there. And on the Vizzies, I don't know if we have Matt in attendance yet, but the Vizzies are normally held in person or either virtual in the last few years, but never have been kind of main stage before. So this time they're actually live on stage from Las Vegas. Have a look at that link down the bottom. This is the Vizzies are the community voting for the community. So really picking people out who've stood out, who are generous with their knowledge, who are passionate, who connect with people. And just it's really a celebration of the whole community. A little bit of a plug for us, obviously, one of the new awards, I guess, if you can call it, is Tug of the Year. So if you like the analytics tug, jump in and give us a vote. That would be lovely. But yeah, the votes must be in by the 6th of May. So do we have Matt in the presenters yet? Does anyone
No,
know?
not yet.
Not
so
yet.
I think you might have to, you might have to have CJ present.
Jump to CJ if that's okay. Hopefully that's okay. Okay, so I'd like to introduce CJ. So as we said before, CJ will actually be live on stage for Iron Viz. Generally, it's like the second day or the end of the second day for the Tableau Conference. He's a Tableau ambassador, enablement lead at JLL, and also was recently appointed Tableau visionary as well for 2022. And he hosts the What's Good guest blogs on his website. So he's going to take us through the beginner's guide to map layers. So if you want to share your screen, over to you, CJ.
Amazing. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and a tough act to follow after Fee and David, but we'll give it a whirl. Yes, hi, I'm CJ. I won't reintroduce myself, but if you'd like to navigate to my website, I do produce tutorials, content, community write-ups to showcase others. It would be great to see you utilize some of that content. Today's topic is map layers, and do bear with me, we're going to be doing a beginner's session. So if you're already very talented at map layers, then this one isn't for you. Some examples of where we've used map layers before is this collaboration with Adam Green, a fellow JLLer. This whole chart is in one sheet. When I talk about map layers, I'll often talk about just one sheet. I like to keep, with my public work, a very low ratio between sheets to dashboards. This is a combination of just lines as well as circles. This whole presentation isn't shouting out JLL people, but we do have another one here where I was inspired by a visualization of Simon Beaumont. And this is actually even more layers because we're using a Gantt chart in the background for the box. We're including another Gantt chart to color in this white area, as well as put in the sections of each different year that a player had won. In the same sheet, we also have a line that goes from end to end for the years, as well as circles overlay. So this is about 4 or 5 different coordinates plotted in the same sheet. A final example, again, with the same JLLer, Simon Beaumont, we created this visualization last year to highlight Manchester United's record. I probably won't create another one this year because Man United haven't played as well. but this is a polygon background of 4 coordinates joined up, as well as the same 4 coordinates joined up for the shadow. We have on the same sheet a line going from the left to right, same with the bottom, a shape as another layer, the text as another layer, and then the circles as another layer, and then of course a Gantt chart here in the middle. So this one had 9 or 10 layers to it. A little bit overwhelming, but today, do bear with it, is a lot simpler than that, and we'll be looking to go through step by step and marrying it up to some data so that we can understand how map layers is like painting a picture. So a good place to start is, what are map layers? Map layers is a set of coordinates. I like to think of it as painting a picture or just plotting multiple points on top of one another, moving from the back to the front, like you're painting a picture itself. When we talk about map layers, unfortunately, Tableau doesn't have a native ability just to do layers. I would love for it to introduce a function that's just like plot, and then you can plot X and Y coordinates. But we do utilize what would be considered an actual map. And what you can see here is, let's make that a bit bigger, no one's going to be able to read that. We use this function called makePoint. And makePoint function is literally plotting an X and a Y coordinate, or a longitude versus a latitude. We don't actually necessarily need to know that we're using the maps as the actual background functionality. It's a bit of a hacky method until Tableau introduce a method of plotting X and Y's with a different function. So let's take a look at some data and how it plots. This is my data set today. Whenever I'm learning something new, I use the most simplistic numbers and letters. And let's move this here for now. Do utilize the chat if the text isn't big enough to read. But what you'll see here.
Speak closer to the mic, otherwise we cannot hear you very well. Thank you.
Apologies.
Yeah, sorry, CJ, I think it's just when you look away, the mic doesn't pick up as much. Yeah.
I shall move my screen to look at the screen.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling that out. Right, where was I? You'll see that I've highlighted these by color, and we're plotting an X and Y. This is a very simple scatter plot. And then we've color coordinated them. There's 2 points here, and then the blue points are these 7 points here. But what if we wanted to make this a map layer? Well, we can do that, and you'll see that this is the exact same chart, but what we've done is we've taken our X and Y coordinates and plotted them against one another. And you'll see this is the exact same thing as plotting X and Y in the columns and rows here, but we're making it into a map. So let's quickly deviate and show how that's done. So once again, this is the calculation, a make point of our X and Y, or our fake longitude and latitudes. And once we create that, we can simply double click and it will create a map version of it. So what you have to consider is these are longitudes and latitudes. So it actually thinks it's a map. And if I zoom out far enough, you'll see the map itself. What I'll then want to do is turn the map layer off. And if I drag the X and Y onto the detail for context and the color onto color, you'll see that we have the chart. I won't redo the scales on the X and Y axis, but you'll notice how it's the same chart. So that's the very simple way. And I think people need to play around with that a little bit to understand the functionality of turning off this background map And we'll come on to this and a few tips later on. Okay, so that's all well and good. And realistically, we've just built a scatter plot. But how can we break this down into additional sections? So sometimes when I like to think about painting this picture back to front, I like to break up the column into two separate sections. So one thing we can do is take all of those blue points and just say, well, if the color's A, or all the blue points, then we'll plot the points. And we can do the same with a separate calculation of saying, when the color is B, or the orange points, let's plot those. And in a similar fashion, we can plot A, and then to create a new layer, we have to drag the coordinates of our next layer and add it to the marks layer here. You'll see that I've done that with the map turned on, and that's really important. We can then go back and drag our information onto detail. Of course, then we can change the marks card separately for each one of these to change the colors. And that's a way of creating two separate layers from the same two columns. So why is this useful? It means that we can separate our columns out to separate points and only focus on certain dots. We can also resize these. So for example, if I happen to have wanted my blue points to be a bit smaller than the marks on orange, we can size these appropriately separately. What you will notice is this 11 nulls. The reason there's 11 nulls is, well, if we take a look back at the data set, when we plot these 2 points, we actually have all of these as nulls. And then when we plot all these points, we'll have these 2 points of nulls. And the quick ones amongst you might say that would only add up to 9. Later in my presentation, we also utilize these 2 rows, which makes it 11 nulls. It is a little bit confusing having 11 nulls when theoretically you have plotted all your points, but because of this method, Tableau won't understand that concept. Okay, moving on, a third idea we can introduce is, can I utilize different columns and plot them in the same chart? Well, yes. And what you'll see is I've followed the method here and introduced a new calculation, NP new. Sorry about my naming conventions, they're not the most creative. And NP new is looking at these purple points over here. So we take the original 2 layers that we've created and we create a new calculation that looks at 2 separate additional columns. And we've dragged that onto the marks layer. We've changed that to shape and we've added those 2 fields onto the detail. And what's really important here is when you're looking at the columns, you have to remember what columns you're dragging onto detail. So for example, the first 2, we're looking at the columns X and Y, but this third new introduction looks at a column called X new and Y new. And you'll see how that's plotted this shape in purple. What you will see is that the purple circle overlays the orange dot here. So I've used a transparent circle, but with a purple outline. You'll also notice when I hover this point, the purple point is overlaying the orange one because of the order of the layering. And that's really important for when you go to hover. if I was to move this down, you'd be able to hover over the orange mark first. One thing that I think stands out in a good way is the ability to hover over different marks for different tooltips. Again, we've got multiple nulls because of looking at multiple columns in separate references. The fourth thing I want to showcase is the user case of a full outer join. So here we're looking at one set of data, and we could almost say that this is, a left join on this part of the data. But what if the data sits completely separately? I could, in fact, join this data set with a 1-to-2 connection to mean that none of these data points connect to these data points. But is it possible to still plot these on the same chart? Well, given this and my presentation, yes, it is. And again, we just simply create a make point function of our X and Y coordinates. Let's remove this for now and drag this onto the marks card and change this to a shape. Let's make it gray. And then let's drag on the columns we need onto detail. So X full outer join and the Y full outer join. And again, we can resize this to whatever size we want. So I think for now, that's kind of the basics of how we can create different points and plot the columns against one another. But realistically, is this useful? Probably not in terms of context of the business. So we will move on to see how it can be applied to business data. But a few myths with data, with map layers. The first one is, can I add reference lines? The answer is yes. But you have to make sure that your background map is on none. If I go back to our very first map, which is a map layer, and I go to analytics, all of these are grayed out because you can't add a reference line to an actual map. So it's only when you've turned off the map reference of here to none that you can go ahead and add constant lines. The second myth is, am I restricted in the number of layers? Well, I got to 25 and I didn't add any extra because I thought the whole Tableau workbook might crash. I would like to see someone see how many they can get to before it does break. But for this presentation, I shall leave it at 25. Just know that you can add as many layers as you probably should have onto your charts. One common problem that we should probably look at is, why can't I add layers? So you'll see I have that original chart and I'm trying to add these make points and it doesn't come up in the top left corner. And that's because you need more than one layer for it to work. So I go back, I turn the map on, and I can add as many additional fields onto my marks card. One thing that I've noticed people will do is they'll either add a 0 stationary point. And what do I mean by that? I mean just a placeholder. And then they're able to add to the marks card but the background map is turned off. So as long as you have 2 different layers to your chart, you can add extra map layers without having to go back and turn it on and then turn it back off. It's quite a repetitive task. So in fact, I could actually drag this, albeit the map is turned off, and then build my chart. What I would then do, once I've finished, is just remove the blanks, or you can leave them hidden. So CJ, so far, all you've done is plotted points against one another. Let's have a look at how we can utilize this in a business setting. This first chart is 2 different sheets, which you'll see color coordinated down here at the bottom. We have a line chart, dual axes, with a circle of the maximum sales, and then we have a dodgy formatted KPI. But what if I wanted to introduce this all into one? Well, let's quickly have a look at the data. And here we have months and sales. So this is our X and our Y coordinates. So given what I've said, we would create our X and our Y values plotted against one another. And so we do that, but what you will notice, when I go back to the dashboard, is we have a missing month. Month 12 is dropped off of our chart. At month 12, sales was 300. But it's been cut off. And the reason being is because we are using a map, the extremes of the values can only go to the lengths of the longitudes and latitudes of an actual map. And that is 90, plus or minus 90, or plus or minus 180, dependent on longitude or latitude. So a really important thing to do is scale back the chart size. So what you can do is scale it proportionally so it will look the same, but actually the values that are plotted are half the size or proportional to 1. Let's take a look at how we can do that. Well, the first thing is making sure that sales value of 300 is actually less than 180. So what you'll see I've done is taken for every sales point, divide it by the maximum. So proportionally, we're taking each of the sales and dividing it by our maximum amount. This means that everything on this scale is actually going between the points 0 and 1. Because our month only goes up to 12, I've left it as it is, but good practice. And if you wanted to start building stuff and thinking of it proportionally, would to do the exact same calculation, but with a max month. And that way you're plotting the 0 to 1 and the 0 to 1 axis. Now you'll see when we change our chart to an area, it will plot this lovely area chart and showcase our 300. And for now, let's show our headers. Here we are. So our 0 to 1, and that is our maximum point. We then look to plot the dot. And here we're just taking the maximum for the sales and dividing it by our fixed maximum. So 1 over 1 is 1. And our month, we're taking the month for that value, which is the last month. The next thing we want to do is add a label. Okay, so I thought what's a cool way that we could add maybe some axis points in, but not actually have the whole axis itself? So I've said whether the month is our first month in the data set or the most recent month, let's plot those values as points. And then because I know my bottom axis goes between 0 and 12, I'm just saying shift it left a little bit. Here you'll see that I've plotted the maximum and 0 point for the axis. Let's hide this again. The final call, or the penultimate tip I wanted to give was plotting the y-axis. So again, we follow the same methodology of saying, okay, we know our x coordinate is 0, but we want to move this y label a little bit left. And then I've actually introduced the parameter here. So you can use parameters of values within this make point function. And we're saying, pick a month and plot a label for it. So what I'm referring to is this y-axis here. And if we go to the dashboard, you'll see I've created this y-axis label to go between 0 and 1. So in fact, I could move this around slightly. I think that gives a bit of flexibility to labeling. It is a bit dodgy to format because you'll need to format your labels to go vertically as opposed to horizontally, but I think it's a nice effect. And I've seen in different books where they will have the labels of the axis in the middle or to the left or right, and I think it's a nice way of capturing it. The final thing we can do is add in our KPI stat. And you'll see that I don't reference a single coordinate in terms of our data set, but because I know what my scale is on my y and x axis, I can simply plot a point between that. And so you'll see it is 0.95 up, and then month 6, which is in the middle. I can drag that onto the marks card and then simply drag a calculation onto text. So this is the story. We've created multiple sheets. We've then seen if we can plot that all as one, and we've realized no, because we need the right scale to map these things. And then we've gone ahead and added in some extra context of axes and fitted it all into one sheet with multiple layers. Just to reiterate, it feels like I'm painting a picture with these things. And I'll leave you with the question, is this scalable in the business setting? Thanks.
Thanks very much, CJ. I'm just reflecting that it was supposed to be beginner's guide to map layers, and I feel like it was pretty awesome. A little sprinkle of magic, a little wizardry. So definitely has given us a lot to think about. I've certainly never seen that technique before. So thank you very much for presenting that. I don't know if we've got any questions in the Q&A. So yeah, if you're watching, just put some questions in the Q&A. Ideally the Q&A versus the chat for CJ. But CJ, while we have you here, and because you are 3 weeks away from IronViz or something like that, do you mind just letting us know how you're feeling about competing live on stage after it's been sort of virtual for 2 years? What's that like?
I have nothing I can peg it against in terms of comparison. I am not one for wanting too much attention, albeit shiny rewards is nice, but I'm quite anxious about the whole thing, truth be told. But I'm looking forward to it. And, I'll be sharing the stage with 2 other fantastic individuals. It'll take some of the pressure off of me. It's going to be great.
And who is your supervisor? Who's the person that's
Doris.
you? What's that,
Doris
sorry?
is Doris is, sorry, I've got the kettle on in the background.
Oh, that's all right. And so yeah, there'll be sort of 6 of you on stage, the 3 finalists with their supervisors who are going to help them there for moral support, or I guess any technical support. And then we're going to have the 2 or maybe 1 or 2 hosts as well. What have you learnt from, perhaps watching any of the previous Viz finals? Like, have you kind of looked at that and gone, ways to approach the data? Any tips that you've picked up, or have you just you're just going to wing it?
Life is probably 90% winging it. I really enjoy looking at how different people approach the same situation, and I think one thing that they don't really highlight as much at the conference itself is the data set that they provide you. And so when the 3 people go on stage and create their own visual, they're telling 3 different stories, and they're sometimes completely different tangents, but it's the story they found. And I think this year will be the same. You'll see 3 different stories from 3 different people, all at different levels. But it should be exciting, as well as the designs itself. I try to do some research as to what makes a winning Viz, but I don't think you can tell. It changes each year in terms of design concepts, functionality, chart types, the means of presentation. So again, it could go anywhere, and it's super exciting to see what the others come up with.
Yeah, and so just there'll be the judges, the kind of official judges, and again, I don't know if they're having it this year, but generally they have like a Twitter part where people can actually vote on Twitter for who they prefer as the winner of the finals. So that'll be interesting, and I really like the fact that it's not just the design or the technical ability of the Viz. It's how you present it, the story that you actually tell through the Viz, but then as you present it as well, which is often a forgotten skill or part of our jobs if we get to do it. It's communicating what you've done so that people can understand it, and then making it engaging for them. So yeah, I'm fascinated to see it. I've been able to have quick chats with Kimberly as well. She's over in Australia, and look, I think probably we've sort of reflected a lot of us analysts are generally introverts. Happy to talk to a couple of people, maybe not do the Viz in 20 minutes in front of 5,000 people. So I take my hat off to you guys. What I said to Kimberly is, you guys all won. You're winners. You're on the stage. You're winners. You just get to have fun. And everybody's just gonna cheer you on 100%. So just have the time of your lives. One last question: what regardless of any result, what are you gonna do afterwards to celebrate after Viz is finished?
Big night out. You'll have to join me.
Data night out. Awesome.
Yeah.
Make sure you do something fun to celebrate. You are in Vegas after all. Thank you so much, CJ. And have we got any questions in the Q&A or chat? I'll ask the other.
Let's have a look.
Yash is saying helpful session.
It's just a celebration message there from Yash saying, very helpful session. Thanks for the CJ, and all the best for the finals. Bring it home.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. A couple of others in the comment section. Thank you all. It's very kind. Glad you enjoyed the session.
That's awesome. Well, I think there doesn't look like any specific questions. As I say, that yeah, your presentation was definitely something I've never seen before. So I probably have so many questions I wouldn't even know where to start. So, but thank you very much, CJ, and appreciate you answering some questions about Viz as well. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Welcome. You're more than welcome. All right, just share my screen again. So just a quick quick plug for the DataFam check-ins. You may or may not be aware of the DataFam check-ins. They're kind of held semi-regularly. It's just a really great opportunity to just to meet and network with other people in the data firm. There's no specific presenters or topic or anything. It's really, I think I went to one maybe a week or two ago. It's just a case of all just meeting each other and just going into kind of random breakout rooms, but it's really lovely just chatting, especially again sort of for people who like me are sort of more introverts, just chatting with 5 or 6 different people, feeling like you get to know them, and then maybe if you ever meet them in person, that's really cool. If you don't, that's cool. But yeah, so if you're interested in doing more of the connecting, I'm hoping they'll do something like this during Tableau Conference as well. Then use that QR code, or just search up DataFam check-ins. The next session, which is Apac, and I imagine maybe EMEA friendly, although 8 a.m. is not so friendly, is on the 4th of May. So there's that. Now, do we have Matt on the call? And are you off
I'm here.
mute? You are there. Fantastic. So I did talk to the slide a little bit before and mentioned that you were live, going to be live in Vegas, but I have an idea you might be able to talk to it a little bit better than I. So do you want to have a quick plug of the Vizzies and getting people to vote?
Yes, I can do. So hello, everybody. So the Vizzies are an award that we've been doing for 7 years now, and it celebrates people in the community that are doing fantastic things that might have slipped under the radar and not been recognised by the official Tableau visionaries, or what was known as their masters. So we started these awards to highlight loads of different people in doing amazing things. Some of the awards are technical awards. Some are for people that are making really good blogs or video content. Some people who do great stuff with prep. We have community awards for people that are just empowering other people and elevating them within the community. And this year, we've added a couple of new awards, and one of the new awards is for Tug of the Year. Because I've heard that this tug group is one of the best tug groups, but I also know that the London group think they're one of the best tug groups. And I think there's a couple of other, the Atlanta one, think they're pretty good, and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, we need to sort this out. And Vegas is where you have the big fights. So what better venue is there to have the big showdown between which is the best tug? So we introduced that this year. So there is a link at the bottom there. I've also got a link for it coming up in my talk as well, where you can vote for who you want to win any of those awards. You don't have to vote for every single one. You can vote for up to 10 people in each award. But I think if you like this tug, then you really should vote for this tug.
Let's do it.
I don't know who will get the statue. There is actual hardware that gets given out, so you'll have to then, I don't know, it might have to be then a second vote for who gets it, or whether you share it amongst each member. Every member gets it for a certain amount of time, then you have to pass it around. That might work. I don't know.
Regardless of the result, I think Annabelle will be there in person, so I think she's going to get on her boxing gloves and she can just go out and just take out the competition.
That'd be good.
How's that? I mean, there's no rules against that, right? That'd be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to just do a quick intro. For some of you, Matt would need no introduction. He's been working with Tableau for a very long time. He installed Tableau 10 years ago. I don't even know what version that would have been on. It pales me to think. He is the host, or co-host, I should say, with Emily on the Tableau World podcast, and of course co-hosts the Vizzies, which we've just been talking about. By day, he works at the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute, which has been very interesting during COVID, that's for sure. Ask him about it sometime over a beer. He creates dashboards there to enable DNA sequencing pipelines to keep track of thousands of DNA samples. That's probably an understatement in the data that they produce. And so Fun fact, Matt is in the running for the most slides used in a PowerPoint presentation, which we're hoping he's going to break the record today. He loves a bit of backyard carpentry and allegedly doesn't sleep for a week during the in-person Tableau Conference, which is coming up. So looking forward to a very bedraggled Matt by the end of the week. So would you like to take over and take us through busting DataViz myths, please, Matt?
I would love to.
Thank you.
Can you see the screen okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so this is slide number 1 of 302.
And go.
Strap yourself in, people. Here we go. So thank you very much for inviting me to come talk to you today. I really appreciate it. It's always great to talk to members of the community about what I do and what I love to do, and sort of share things that I've learned. So hopefully you'll all enjoy it. So good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you happen to be from. As you said, big plug for the Vizzies. So we've been doing it for 7 years now. Myself and Emily will be hosting it live on site. It's also going to be live streamed as well. So we've managed to infiltrate it into the calendar, and it's actually going to be on the schedule. So when the schedule gets launched, you'll be able to book it in there. Don't forget, tag of the year, and that's the link and the QR code if you want to go and vote for that. Don't do it during the talk. Wait till after the talk, then you can go ahead and vote. Only vote once, because I do have to clean the data up afterwards. So go easy on me and don't make it too difficult for me. So Sam said, I work here at the Wellcome Sanger Institute, which is a large genome sequencing centre in the heart of the Cambridgeshire countryside. I work here. This is my office, although I'm working at home for the last 2 years, but I should be working in this office. And I work as part of the management operations systems business team, where one of my roles is looking after everything to do with Tableau. I seem to be the default Tableau person on site. So I run the server, I run the training, I run the COE, I do troubleshooting, everything ends up coming on my method. There's a help desk ticket, it has the word Tableau in it, it ends up in my one. So at Sanger, we do a mixture of things where we take DNA, which is biology, we mix it with a little bit of chemistry and quite a lot of engineering, very expensive machines. Each one of these machines is about $500,000. Nice lot of engineering and an awful lot of computing and electronics to produce data, lots and lots of sequence data. So the Sanger Institute was originally set up to complete the Human Genome Project, which was very expensive. It was a $3 billion project, 13-year project to generate the complete sequence to make a human being. And that's about 3 billion bases in length. So that's the chemical molecule that creates every single person that's ever been born or ever will be born. So that's 13 years it took to do that. But as time has progressed, and I started working there 24 years ago, we've now got the latest generation of instruments here. So it's one of these things called NovaSeq, and that will actually sequence 64 genomes in just 24 hours. So 13 years for one, we can now do 64 in 24 hours. And the amount of data that we're producing is quite amazing. So at the moment, we have roughly 42 petabases of sequenced DNA in our databases, which is quite big. And what does that get used for? Well, we've been quite busy over the last couple of years as part of the COVID surveillance in the UK and around the world, where we have been sequencing. We've ramped up significantly our data processing, so now we're able to read 64,000 individual SARS-CoV-2 genomes a week, processed over 2 million samples a year to track the variants that are sweeping across the various countries. So we've been able to identify a lot of the variants that have turned up and share that information with public health officials. So that's the day job. By night, I write a blog, which you can find at mattsworldofviz.com. I also have been known to tweet a couple of times, so you can follow me at Matt_Francis. And I also like to teach. So I have some very good training courses, which you can access at LinkedIn Learning. And as a shameless plug, you can go there and get a free trial to access all of the courses on there, particularly my ones. And the more you watch, the more it helps fund my children's expensive habits. Not drugs, I just mean toys and chocolate. So today, I'm going to talk to you about busting the DataViz myths. So what do I mean when I say a myth? Well, when you think of a myth, this is the sort of thing you usually think of, a traditional story concerning supernatural beings. And when we think of those sort of myths, we're thinking of Greece. No, not that Greece, ancient Greece, not that one. That's the one. So that's the right Greece. Now, the ancient Greeks had gods and myths for everything to explain how the world around them worked. And there was a god and goddess for just about everything you can think of, including data visualization. Were you aware there was a god of data visualization? Well, there is. So there's Hermes, who was a messenger of the gods, so imparting wisdom. There was Athena, who was the goddess of wisdom. And there was Apollo, who was the god of knowledge. There was also Prometheus, who was the god of forethought. Although he did also steal far from the gods and give that to the human, which hasn't worked out too well. So maybe ignore that. So there is some risk with DataViz. That's what I'm basically saying at that point. So that's not the myth we're talking about. This is the actual myth that we're interested in today. So it's a widely held but false belief or idea. Now, what has that got to do with data visualization? How does that work? Well, myths tend to evolve over time. Okay. These all myths they all start from what was originally a good idea. You know, we should do something in this way. And then over time, that then changed to become best practice. And then best practice will then evolve into being a guideline, you know, something that we really should do. And then it develops from a guideline into rules, and then finally into laws. And then as soon as you do anything that kind of breaks these laws, the DataViz police show up and you get beaten around the head. You shouldn't do it like this. And the problem is that the reason behind these laws or guidelines or best practices has been lost. And all people know is the hard written rule, but not how to actually apply them. So what we're going to have a look at is some of the history of some of these commonly held beliefs that we kind of work to. And we're going to try and separate the facts from the fiction and see if we can find the truth and debunk some of those myths. So I've got 7 of those that we're going to have a look at today to work out whether they're busted or whether they're true. Okay, so we'll start with the big one. We'll get the big one out of the way, and then we'll look at some smaller ones in there. So myth number 1, pie charts are evil. Okay, now this is quite a common issue that we have. And whenever you see a pie chart get posted on social or anywhere like that, the DataViz community, sort of the professionals, the people that do this for a living, will kind of jump on that, you know, this is, you know, horrible use of a visualization. There's much better ones you use. You shouldn't ever do those. I saw a tweet the other day, I think from Edward Tufte, saying exactly that thing. So why are pie charts so derided? Now, where does that myth come from? Well, partly because there's an awful lot of bad stuff out there. Okay, you don't have to go very far to find bad examples of pie charts. Okay, you do a quick Google and you get loads of examples of really bad pie charts. Okay, so many of these are just horrific. You know, there's one good pie chart on here, and we know it's the lemon meringue pie chart. Okay, we'll just admit that's a good one. The rest, not quite so good. Okay, so it fills us with horror when we see that sort of stuff. Okay, but I just searched for pie charts. I didn't search for bad pie charts. Okay, pie chart, I found this. Right, your mileage will vary because obviously Google serves up whatever you want to see, but there's some really bad stuff in here. You have examples where we have 3D, which is not good. We have ones where there's loads of segments. We have ones where there's loads of colors. Some of them are ordered, biggest to smallest. Some are random. Some are, you know, all over the place. We have exploded ones. We have ones used for time. You know, there's there's so many bad examples. So when somebody tries to look to see, well, how should I make a pie chart? This is how the internet is telling them how to make it. Okay. So what are the problem with pie charts? Okay, there's a few issues with pie charts, why they get such a bad reputation. Okay. First one is there are too many segments. Okay. That's the first kind of big bad thing that you see with the pie chart. Okay. Now I'm going to show you something that I got sent by a work colleague. This was actually used in a presentation a couple of days ago. Okay. Now this might be triggering. You might get, you might start seeing into the future or something like this. It's quite a thing, but this was actually used in a proper presentation. Okay. And this is a better example of the bad one that I wrote specifically for this talk. Okay. So I think there's 252 segments in that pie chart. And then they've labeled some of those as well with ridiculous percentages like 0.8, 0.9. And, I don't know what that was supposed to do, but somebody sent me that knowing that I have a thing for bad things. I thought, well, I'm going to put that in. I can't not leave that out. Okay. So what is the problem with so many segments? Okay. Well, if we look at this one, for example, the first problem is, certainly when we're doing it with Tableau, is we run out of colors. Okay. So Tableau's got a limit of 20 colors. And if we put the 20 colors on here, we get these repeats. Okay. So you can't really explain. The only thing you can really see from this particular pie chart is there's lots of segments to it. So our data, according to whichever dimension I have on here, is quite fragmented. There's lots of categories. There's lots of different dimensions that are in play here. So it tells us something about the complexity of the data. That's probably the only thing you can really get. But how am I supposed to identify what any of these are? Well, okay, well, we can put a legend on it. But actually the legend makes it even worse because we've got these repeated colors in here. So if I was to ask you, and I do this in my in-classroom training, I'll say, okay, well, what is the blue state? Which state is a blue? Well, there's 3 in there. So they're Alabama, Michigan, or Tennessee. But which one of those 3 is which? Now, if you're lucky, somebody might have ordered this alphabetically. But if they were that conscientious, they wouldn't have made this horrific pie chart in the first place. So that's a very bad assumption to take, isn't it? Okay. So that's the first problem that we have, too many segments. Okay. This is always a good one. It's one of the classic ones that gets used for bad visualization from our friends at Fox News. Always a useful source in here. So the problem with this one, of course, is it's got to add up to 100%. Okay, because pie charts work looking at part to whole relationship. The other thing that you sometimes see pie charts used for is looking at the wrong data. So particularly, I see it a lot, people using pie charts look at changes over time. And the problem is that that's quite difficult to see how one thing has changed. You're asking someone to do an awful lot of work because they have to compare the angle and area of one segment against another segment, like moving along the screen. And that's quite tricky to do. So you're asking someone to do quite a lot of work there. And, nobody's got time for doing that. So what is the problem with these pie charts? Why are they a problem to use sometimes? Well, we're not designed to use pie charts particularly well. We're designed to look at comparisons, right? We're really, really good at comparing positions. We see natural alignment. We can see where things line up. And you see it around your house. Your furniture is arranged because it lines up and it looks good. You've got this natural ability to do that. We're also really good at seeing outliers. When something is not quite lined up, when it's out there on its own, we notice that. This is evolution at work here. This is us seeing the tiger hiding in the bushes. We can spot these things. Okay. We're really good at comparing the lengths of things, but we're not very good at comparing areas. And one of the problems is that pie charts use 2 things to encode their information. They use an area, okay, and you're rubbish at comparing areas, okay. So if you take these 2 circles, okay, and if I was to ask you, So if this is size 1 on the left, how big is the one on the right? Okay. So we put a show of hands up and people will call out the numbers of what they all think. But it always surprises people when you tell them that this is actually 20 times bigger than the first one. Okay. And that's not obvious. It doesn't look 20 times bigger. It's either much smaller or much bigger. You're not good at comparing areas. It's just something that's really hard to do. The other thing that pie charts use are angles. Okay. So we're trying to compare multiple sizes of angles to compare one against the other. Okay. So this is an example. In this example here, this is a deconstructed pie chart because we're comparing the sizes of all of the angles. Okay. Now, quite a few years ago, Stephen Few, who is one of the architects of how we do a lot of the things we do, wrote a big thing about pie charts, and he advocated that a stacked bar chart is better than a pie chart. So it looks like this myth is pretty much true, that sort of pie charts are bad. Yeah, I think we've demonstrated some bad examples, and there are other things that are a better way of doing it. Well, no, not entirely. Pie charts do have a good value, and there's several things that they do have going for them. And the really good thing they have going for them is that every single person knows how to read a pie chart. Okay, how many of you here have ever had a birthday? Or how many of you have got children or nieces and nephews or have seen a birthday cake? Okay. Now, a child knows when their piece of birthday cake is not as big as their siblings. Okay. So from year one of your first birthday, you are taught to compare your slice against your siblings and other people's slices. So you're very used at physically cutting up a piece of cake. Same thing works with a pie chart. And when you think about it, clocks work on knowing the proportions of a circle. So we literally divide time into pie charts. Okay, it's a 2-segment pie chart. That's all it is. And you're conditioned from the first day you start telling the time to look at a pie chart and slicing time up. Okay, so you don't have to tell anybody how to read a pie chart. You don't have to spend time or space in your visualization or instructions on how to read a pie chart. Okay, they're very, very easy to understand. The other thing that pie charts are quite good for is looking at how the part to whole relationship works. Okay. So if you look at this bar chart here, we can clearly see that the top blue bar is much, much bigger than the other ones. Okay. We can see that the two at the bottom are pretty much the same. And the two in the middle, the blue and the orange, or the greeny blue and the orange, are, slightly less, but similar. So you can tell a lot about that, about the absolute sizes and which is biggest, which is smallest, and how big they are. So that's useful information. But if I put this same thing into a pie chart, what you can then see is that actually the blue, the large blue section, the dark blue, is as much as all the other ones combined, near enough. It's just over 50%. You can't see that same relationship in the bar chart. Okay, so the bar chart has a use, the pie chart has a use. Okay, so what does that mean for pie charts? Well, pie charts are not bad in itself. Okay, so we have to accept that bad pie charts are bad, and we can use them. Okay, but we have to be aware that there are certain things we have to abide by. Okay, they've got to add up to 100%, which is fine if we're doing it in Tableau, because we can only make 100% in our pie charts, and you've got to limit the number of segments. Now, I tend to say 4 or 5 maximum if possible. However, that's obviously going to vary depending on the data that you've got. But on the whole, pie charts, are they evil? I think we've pretty much busted that one. Okay, so they're not evil in itself, just evil. Pie charts are evil. So the next one, you should never truncate the y-axis. Is another common one that you often see out there. So again, where does this one come from? And you get charts like this where you are comparing two values, and we've truncated the axis on here. So we're only starting at 37%. And obviously it makes the 43% look significantly bigger than the 39%. And whenever you see a bar chart that has a truncated y-axis, it always makes you slightly suspicious. It makes you suspicious about what are they trying to hide? What are they trying to show that is being hidden within that data? How much worse can it make this data look if I truncate the y-axis? Okay, so sometimes it can be deceptive. Other times it's not deceptive, but it just doesn't make it very good. And hot off the press, this is something I took this morning on the TV. So this is looking at the temperatures. Now, I know these temperatures, these are all in Celsius. Now, I know that some of you over other side of the world, right, these temperatures mean nothing, all right? I realized that over there, you know, you can fry an egg on the pavement and all this sort of stuff and all this. But for us, this is quite warm and comfortable, okay? But it's a truncated bar chart, okay? So on Wednesday, it's going to be 12 degrees, whereas Monday, it's going to be 16 degrees. That's only that's not that much of a difference. But the way it's presented on here, it looks like on Wednesday, I'm going to freeze to death, okay? So this has emphasized the big change in here, which, you know, that's obviously not good. Now, what is the problem with truncating that? Well, truncating with a bar chart is a problem because we're comparing the length. And to do that, you need to have a reference point. You have to have a reference point that you're measuring it from and to. Now, in case of bar charts, it's always going to be the axis. Okay, so in here, we are registering the length of these four regions against a baseline of 0. If we take that baseline away and we truncate it, we can see here that it looks from this data that 2013 was a really, really bad year. Okay, we didn't really sell anything at all. But in actual fact, when we look at it, it was all right. I mean, it's half the sales-ish of 2014, so it didn't compare as well as that, but it wasn't in itself a bad year, okay? So what we think about when we're truncating axes, is it obvious? Now, the problem with this one is that it's not obvious that I've done the truncation, okay? Because the first thing when somebody sees the visualization is they're going to notice the big blocks of color. They're going to notice the bars, okay? And this is an inherent problem that we have with all of our data visualization, that people are drawn to the actual image first, then they'll go and read the other bit that does all the supporting stuff. So if we were to use this, I'm relying that at some point, somebody's going to see the bars, then they're going to look at the axis to see what the values are. Then I'm relying on them to look down at the bottom of the axis to realize, oh, that's not 0. So I'm asking someone to do a lot of work in order to try and do that. So can you truncate the axis? Well, you can under 2 different occasions, okay? If 0 doesn't make sense, okay? So for an example, if we were to look at, say, how long it takes to run 100 meters. So we look at 100 meters world record over time, okay? So we're doing this as a line chart, okay? Now, line charts don't have the same problem, particularly with truncation, because we're not measuring the distance between the axis and the point and the line. With a line chart, you're comparing the position of one point to the previous point and to the subsequent point. So you're looking for changes in there. So if we don't truncate the y-axis in this case, you can't see any detail at all. It's pretty flat. It doesn't look anything interesting, okay? Now, it's unlikely that anybody's going to run 100 meters in 0 seconds. Right? I know there's a lot of drugs and people are getting faster and everything else, but I think we're a long ways off that yet. So if we do truncate the y-axis, what we can then see is the record kept dropping and dropping and dropping. There was a massive drop in sort of the late 60s. And then again, the most recent data is Usain Bolt, you know, who shaved off a lot of time in there. So we can see where there are these big step changes in there. So say that's okay because it's unlikely anybody can run in 0 seconds. The other reason why we might want to truncate is we're looking at small fluctuations in values, okay? And we want to look at the change between the previous and the subsequent one. And a good example of this, we see this all the time, is in stock prices. Because with stock prices, what we're interested in is the daily or even hourly fluctuation in prices, you know, and that's the bit that's interesting because those small fluctuations make a massive difference. Okay, so there are some circumstances where not having the 0 can make sense, but not with a bar chart because of that baseline. Unless you're using a call out. I mean, if you do it, you need to make it really, really obvious that you have done that truncation. Okay. And of course, we've said where the 0 makes no sense. So in terms of never truncating the y-axis, I mean, it's partly true, but under circumstances, we don't have to deal with it. Okay. So the third one's a quick one. So you should always label your axis. And it's not so much a myth, but it's kind of like a guideline that I've seen in a few places. So if we go back to looking at our record on here, we truncated the y-axis, but we're okay with that. We're okay. And what we're interested in is in terms of the labeling of the axis. So can you actually read that axis? You know, you're asking somebody to do a lot of work to kind of get a ruler and line it up against the particular data point they're interested in, read it along to the y-axis, and then figure out what that value actually means. Okay, so is anybody going to actually do that? Probably not, because we can always use tooltip. We can always just hover over that point and see what the actual value is. So we can get rid of the axis, okay, because we have the ability to find out what those data points are. However, in those circumstances where you do get rid of that axis, what we should do instead is probably annotate those points of interest. So where we have this particular interesting bits where there are these larger jumps, where these are these sort of bits, so within that data we can say, well, that's interesting, what's happening there? We can get away with using a annotation instead of having the x-axis there. So we don't always need to have an x-axis or y-axis, as long as we're able to annotate and explain the differences in the values or be able to use the tooltip. So always labeling the axis. No, we don't need to, because we can mitigate that with other things within Tableau. So you should never use 3D in a data visualization. Okay, so is this a good myth or a bad myth, a good rule or a bad rule? Well, partly we know it's a good rule because Tableau won't let you do it, and Tableau generally sticks to the good rules. However, where does this myth come from? So there's 3 reasons why 3D tends to be bad. Okay, it obscures information. Okay, and again, what I'm going to show you next are some things I've seen actually in real life walking around the building at work. Okay, so you get a chart like this when you're using 3D, and the problem is that you can't see what's at the back, which makes that somewhat problematic. Okay, so it hides the data. I've got no idea really what's happening with the red bars at the back and how it overlaps with the green and the blue, and it's very difficult to see what's going on. It's just hard to see. I mean, that's not what we're trying to do with our visualization. The other problem you have is with alignment. So in this rather lovely example here, we have our 3 axes, but how on earth are you supposed to work out any of those data points, any of them, not even the ones that are circled? Where do they align to on any of those 3 axes? You know, I don't know. This, I mean, the point here is it 0.5? Is it? There's just no way. So that's a pretty bad example of a bad 3D visualization. I think you'd all agree, and I can hear you all nodding. But do you think that could be made worse? No, you say, no, Matt, you're crazy, man. You know, you can't make that any worse. I think you'll find that you can, because if you change that into a bubble plot and introduce sizing into it, now I've got no idea if this big red dot is actually because the value is larger. And in this case, it's somebody's age, I think. So does that mean that they are old, or does that mean that the dot is actually closer to the camera or further away from the camera? So we've now got perspective in there as well. So I'd have no idea what is going on with that at all. So the problem is that 3D will always distort any kind of visualization. So in a 3D pie chart, you get this deception. Now, I say deception because it can be used in a deceptive way. The problem that we have here is that the red segment is angled towards us. So anything in the background tends to look smaller, anything in the foreground tends to look bigger. And the problem that you have with something like this as well, when you have the 3D with the shape there as well, as we spoke earlier with pie charts, you're looking at area and essentially looking at the amount of red there is in that red segment. Well, you have the triangle part of it, but then you've also got that bar of the rim as well that's making that segment look even bigger than it did. Now, it's deceptive because sometimes this is used intentionally. And I know people using data visualization to be deceptive. I mean, who would do that sort of thing? I mean, that's only done by, you know, naughty, bad people, isn't it? Well, evil organizations like Apple do it as well. Okay, so this is a slide that was used at one of their presentations. And the question that I asked for this is, which is the second biggest company in terms of smartphone market share? Okay. Now, the rules of a pie chart is that, well, you label it from biggest to smallest, don't you? So you see the alphabetical, or you usually do it sort of biggest to smallest, smallest to biggest, or something like this. Okay. So in that case, you would say, well, okay, well, the second biggest market, therefore, must be Apple, because the blue one is obviously the biggest, then it's Apple. When you put the numbers on there, you find, well, actually, Apple's the third biggest market share, because we've got this other sort of all lumped together in there. And what they've done is they've made sure that Apple is at the bottom. And by adding the 3D, you notice that the green portion gets that little extra dark shade of green on the bottom. And when people looked at this a little bit further, what they actually noticed was that if you un-3D it, so if you flatten it, it's not actually a circle, it's an oval. So they purposely stretched it at the bottom to make that green section even larger. So 3D is generally a pretty bad idea. And we know that, of course, because Tableau doesn't do 3D. So 3D is definitely bad, should never be used. Yeah, but there's always that exception, isn't there? So this was a chart that was done a few years ago now in New York Times that kind of says, actually, you can do 3D and it can work really well. Unfortunately, because the New York Times is now behind a firewall, I can't actually show you the live version of this, but if you have access, I'm definitely going to have a look at this. So it's the yield curve from the New York Times. And how this works is really quite good. You can spin this and turn this graph around in any way that you like. So the problem that you have where you can't see into the values of this curve, you can, because you can rotate it around. But the next and the back button on here actually step you through the story. And what it does in a really brilliant way is it will rotate the view round to show the data from this view, and then it will rotate it to show you that view, and then rotate it to show you that, because it actually steps it through and it uses the 3D to tell a story, which you wouldn't be able to do as compellingly if it was a number of different charts. So there is that exception, but in general, 3D, yeah, don't do it. So the next one, geographic data always needs to be mapped. Now, this isn't necessarily a law, but it's pretty much a compulsion. You know, we like maps. Maps look good. They're cool and fun. And because depending on obviously what you do for a day job and where you work, you don't get to make them very often. So any time you see a geographic data in there, it's like, oh, I can make a map, I can make a map, I can make a map. And you get all excited. Well, I do anyway. I mean, that might just be me. I don't know. So maps look cool. Okay. And they can be quite useful. They can be useful where you're trying to tell a story. Okay. So in this example here, there are 4 charts in here. So we have a bar chart showing that the Democratic Republic of Congo was the highest. We've got a line chart showing how things change over time. And we were comparing one country against several other countries all kind of grouped together. Now, what the map here does is it's useful because it's showing that there is a high level of malaria in one particular area, and then the surrounding regions are quite high, and then how it kind of gets out. So the map is providing that kind of useful thing of anchoring the story within the actual region itself. This one's looking at migration in Europe, where you can move between different countries. So it's showing that people from this country move to this country and there. So it's talking about population movement. So the map is kind of helping to show that. This is quite a famous one, looking at animal-related calls in New York. Again, it's showing where the density of these requests are of particular types, and you can start to investigate the data and look at that stuff in there. So maps actually are cool and they are quite useful. And it turns out that John Snow did know quite a lot after all, because he was the one that did that cholera map. So maps are always tempting. It's always, there's a temptation there to make that map. Is it always a good choice? Not necessarily. So one of the problems you have with maps is with navigation. Okay, so a map, if you're just mapping data, so we're looking at sales in states, in the US. So a map relies on the viewer knowing some of the geography that's being used. Okay, and in the case of the US, I know where Texas is, I know where California is, I know where Florida. I could probably make a guess at where sort of New York is, but the other ones I wouldn't know. If I wanted to know, where Montana was, for example, I wouldn't have a clue. Okay, so for that kind of data, it's not a good choice. So a better one would be a bar chart. If we turn it into a bar, then I can easily read down and find any of the states and see that Montana actually had quite low sales. Okay, so that's quite easy to do. So the other problem with the states is certainly when you have something like a field map. Okay, the field maps color an area depending on a value. Okay, so in this case, when we're looking at the sales, but the area has a size and it can make some areas more prominent than the others, particularly towards the eastern states where we have much smaller land area. So your eye is drawn to the intensity of the color, but the amount of the color in terms of the area is also can be slightly deceptive. We've seen you're not very good at looking at areas. So if we said in here, well, what were the top 3 states for sales? So you'd probably say California, and then probably New York because they look quite dark. But then which one's next? It's a toss-up between Texas and Washington, but they look quite equal because the colors are about the same. But Texas looks that bit bigger. Put them in the bar chart, order it. You can easily see which is biggest to smallest. Okay, so in both those examples, the map doesn't actually help things. It's much better to use the bar chart, either ordered alphabetically because we can find what we're interested in, or ordered it by size, and we put some color on it, make it look interesting, and we can order it that way. Okay, so doesn't look good for the map so far. So if we want to look at profitability, for example, we could put them all in here, and again, I could then read down to find a particular state, see if it's profitable or not, and how much of a loss or how much profit we made on it, and I list it, sort it by the amount. And we get something like this. I can see the most profitable, least profitable, and I can see all of that in there. So again, big tick for the bar chart. Okay, so the map has fallen by the wayside in here. But if we plotted this in a map, what's the map going to look like? Oh, well, actually, that shows us something quite interesting. That shows that all of the southern states were making a loss. So that's interesting. Maybe we want to have a look at that. Why did that? Is it, are we not, is our sales team down there not good? Are the people that live there not interested in our products? Is our sales team, running out of ads? Something's going on. There is a geographic issue with our data that you couldn't see from there, unless you happen to know that all of these states at the bottom are the southern states. Now, you might do that because, you might have that. But the map instantly pulls that out. Okay. So one of the problems I said with the maps is the idea that certainly with the geographic map is you have this, the area size thing. Well, we can mitigate that slightly by using a symbol map. So we make everything to be individual circles. It still suffers the same problem with navigation, knowing which state is which. And certainly in the case of, in the eastern states, but particularly if you look at other mapping levels, you get a lot of clustering and overlaps. You may be able to make it into some kind of a tiled map and equalize the areas so all of them are the same shape, and then you could do the same sort of thing. But then it does also then rely on the fact that I don't know which state is a particular state. You can compare it by region, but the region doesn't necessarily fit up geographically. So this state over here in red, Louisiana is the furthest state on there, but it doesn't quite match on there. So there's lots of things to think about when it comes onto a map. So the big question really is, if you've got geographic data, should you map it or not? And the answer to that is the only answer that there is in data visualization. It depends, which you all said out loud because I heard you say it. Okay, so it depends. And the thing we need to think about, particularly in terms of map, is that the where matters. So does the where make the most important thing? Do we need to know the position of this thing compared to this thing to make a judgment call on that information? So just because you can map your data doesn't necessarily mean that you should. Okay. So should they always be mapped? No. So our sixth one, a viz must be readable in under 10 seconds. Or the flip side of that is you've got to tell a story with your data. Every data should be a storytelling experience. Okay, they're kind of two sides of a not dissimilar coin. So there's a kind of struggle between two camps. It's kind of like head and heart sort of thing. It's like an either this or that something should be either it's got to be simple or it's got to be complicated. It's got to be plain or it's got to be fancy. Okay, and the answer is it depends. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to stop thinking about it in terms of complexity just being a bad thing. We need to stop thinking about it being in terms of a discrete thing, something being simple or complex, and think of it being as a continuous thing. Okay, so we need to think of complexity of having a scale and a range of values. Okay, so if we instead think of complexity as being a continuous range, then we can plot every data type we can think of upon this scale. So we can have a simple bar chart. It's one of the most simple visualizations you can get, but it's incredibly effective. Okay, so that would sit down on the low complexity side of the scale. It's perfectly good and has good thing. The map, slightly more complex, so it sort of fits a bit further along. Something like this from Zach, where he's looking at how sales of music has changed over time. It's kind of interesting. Is that simple or is that complex? Well, the visualization is quite simple because it's, a number of colors, there's nothing, it's not hard to read, but it's not straightforward either. So it kind of sits in the middle of this complexity where it's sort of telling this story. And then something like this from Brian Moore, where you can create these amazing patterns, that's quite complex. So which of those is best? Which is the right one that you should be using? And then you have this, again, this sort of thing where we have a very complex, but it also tells the story. But the way this is done is that each step by step is accessible. So it's the stepping through that makes it accessible. So instead of thinking about should something be complex or should it be simple, it needs to be as complex as it's needed to do. Okay. So in terms of it must be readable in under 10 seconds, I see quite a lot. That's busted. And in terms of everything's got to be a complicated story, that's busted as well. Okay. So we come to our last one. Okay. And it's a biggie. Okay. So you should never use red and green in a visualization. Okay. So this is right up there with pie charts as the big one when all the DataViz police will come out. So where does this come from? Well, it obviously comes from color blindness. Okay, is not the only reason, but it's one of the main cited reasons for that. And red-green colorblind is one of the most common. It affects, sort of 1 in 10 people. So the default position tends to be, well, can you use red and green in a visualization? And the default answer comes back as no, you shouldn't do that. So if you look at an example in a map, and we've got this map here plotted using red to green, high to lowest. That looks fine to me because I can distinguish between the two. But if we put that through a color blindness comparator, I've used VizCheck in the past to do this. it will look something like this. All these shades of brown. 50 Shades of Brown was the less successful follow-up to 50 Shades of Grey. So the problem with this is that you can't distinguish which was the good brown and which was the bad brown. We just have all these various ranges in here. So red and green, you shouldn't use it with a color range. Okay, and this is particularly problematic because you see it's an awful lot in business dashboards. You know, how many times have you been asked to do a RAG type dashboard? You know, every project managers love them, don't they? Everything's got to be red, amber, green. And of course, the problem is that this color system then makes it seem that you can't distinguish between the two. Okay. But the problem is there is a good reason why people want to use red and green, is that red has a very, very strong association with things being bad, and green has a good association with things being good. And if 1 in 10 people can't distinguish it, that still leaves 90% of people that can do. So it's a problem that we can't utilize one of these really strong associations because of that. So there are kind of two ways around it that we can utilize this strong association. So we can use high contrast shades. And Emily wrote a blog post a while ago where she looked at the different kinds of red-green that we can use. And she used an example like this where it's 2 single colors. So the color range, definitely no. But for this one here, where we have a very strong shade of red and strong shade of green, what that means is when you run it through VizCheck, you can see that we have the 2 shades. Okay. Now I can't tell which is red and which is green. Okay. So that's a problem. But we put a legend on it. We can distinguish with that because we've chosen far enough shades of red and green that when we put them through our colorblind checker, they are distinguishable. And that's what we're after. The other option that you can do as well is we can double encode. So if you've got something like this where I'm looking at, I can't remember what I'm looking at, something, you know, something good, something bad, red, green, just change it into an arrow, distinguishes that these are going this way, these are going that way. So use double encoding in there. Another way that you can think of this as well is that if you were to take your visualization and print it out, can you still read all the information from it? If you took the color out and turned everything to grayscale, can I still understand the visualization that's going on? That also works in another terms of accessibility, is that if I'm relying on somebody using a tooltip to find out all the information, have I got enough in my black and white printout to get on with it? Okay. So never use red and green in a visualization. So I think we can bust that one because we can use it as long as we understand why we can use it. So hopefully that's armed everybody here to be a DataViz mythbuster. You don't get a badge or anything like that, but you can call yourself that if you like. There's no, there's no official accreditation, I'm afraid. We haven't got a data busting institute quite yet, but I'm working on it. So hopefully you can see that with a little bit of thought, a little bit of thinking, we can understand why these myths exist and how to apply them or how to ignore them. We can be armed with that knowledge, and we can look to seek out ways that we can better visualize our data, you know, and we can pray to the God of knowledge for our guidance, because as G.I. Joe tells us, that knowing is half that battle. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you for listening, and thank you for not leaving. And I'll leave you with a shameless plug for where you can learn more about this. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
For those counting, that's slide number 303.
Woohoo! That's awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. You wouldn't have been able to see the comments coming through on the chat, but everyone was like, that this is an amazing presentation. And we loved doing the on the side, the slide count as well. So definitely, I hope we busted some records there as well for most slides per presentation. Very, very engaging, and thank you so much. Do we have any questions? We had one just about the color website, just to check for color blindness, and I think that was vizcheck.com, but let's have a look. Oh, this just, yep, somebody else say it was just a really brilliant presentation. Anything on the chat? Doesn't look like there's any other questions from anybody. I would yeah, so have a look at
I'll tell you another little thing that make you laugh. So at the end of, so I presented this at one of the previous Tableau conferences, did it live in a room, and afterwards you get feedback about your course and people put comments in there what they thought, and I had one of, if not the best comment about this particular talk, where it complained there was too much sexual content in it. And I think part of the reason, I blame Fiona particularly for that, because there was a joke in there. Yeah, it was you. There was a joke in there about the VizCheck website. And I said on there, I said, well, don't go to vizcheck.com, because that was her old blog. And I made some comment about that. Oh, there's stuff in there you definitely don't want to, you know, that's the only thing I could think of. Because I racked my brain thinking, I don't remember doing that. If I'd have known, and if I'd have known that got you the likes, I'd have peppered the stuff, you know?
Absolutely, you got to keep the audience engaged. Annabelle saying nude statues, I think. Absolutely brilliant. No, that was really good, and thank you very much for that. I'll just share a screen again quickly. So we've made along there. So thank you very much, everybody, for presenting. We have run a little bit over time, so I've literally just got this slide to say if you do want to present, just grab that QR code and yeah, just let us know, just get in touch. That would be lovely. And the next meeting is around the start of June. So that's going to be a US and APAC friendly time zone. Yeah, so just want to say thank you everybody for coming along, and hope you've got a lot of value and a bit of laughs out of it as well, and hopefully see you in the next meeting. Thank you so much.